Ivan Braginsky was walking back home from that world meeting, which this time took place in Moscow. Relieved from all of those arguing nations, he still wished they became one, so they would all live in peace. Walking further through the sunset and the peaceful town, his foot noticed something was off about the sidewalk. A strange, shallow hole lay through the cement, forming the figure of a footprint. As the Russian raised his head and discovered that a path was suddenly in front of him, everything seemed blurry, and all he heard was ringing. In a lot of pain, Russia roguely fell on his knees, nearly digging his nails on his head. But the pain was immediately gone a few seconds later, along with the ringing and blurriness. And all of a sudden, it left no remains. However, as he got up, another surprise awaited him. The music of people talking and cars passing through the world had died down. Nothing but absolute silence. It wasn't the type of silence where you could hear crickets chirping, birds singing, and a clock ticking. It was absolute silence. Like if he was in space, as you can't hear any sound unless you are involved with pulsating electromagnetic vibrations. No sound could travel to his ears. All the people, cars, and bikes were gone. The town turned into a desert, but you also could call it a setting for a post-apocalyptic story. It also became much darker than normal, considering how all the lights were turned off and how all the doors and windows were closed. The absolute silence was broken by Ivan getting up on his feet and slowly walking as he began to pant nervously. He didn't trust the footprints. All he wanted was to go back home and feel the safety of his house. But to do that, he had to walk through that unnerving ambient. The bigger the effort, the better the reward, they say. As he walked further on the way he always used to go back home, he realized the path of footprints were leading him into his own house, and how they slowly became bigger the nearer he came towards his safe space. When he first met this strange path, the marks seemed very small, the size of a finger. However, as he set his own feet into his block, his feet were fitting perfectly onto the footprints. When he got at the location of his house, wait, that didn't seem to be his house. Instead, Russia saw a very tall, old castle. Despite its fanciness, it looked abandoned, considering that the building was falling apart. The nation wondered if he was in the wrong block. No, it seemed to be the right one. After all, his house did have a small grocery store near it, and there it was. The same store was there, from the same angle from the front of his house. The black and lavender mailbox Ivan always lived with looked exactly the same. This couldn't be. Was this really his house? Even the sunflower-filled garden looked the same, with the same flowers he loved since he was born. As Ivan slowly touched the cold, metal doorknob that would open the creepy wooden doors, the wind became more and more intense, someone to give him company in the absolute silence with the sound that only he was making. With the cold waves of air intensifying, the tall man fastened the process and entered what seemed to be pure darkness. At the moment when nothing but black surrounded Russia, he heard a little click. Feeling behind him, the doors didn't budge. That castle locked him by the inside. Widening his eyes, he wondered what was going on, if this was a dream or not. But it felt too real. He was feeling very conscious. It wasn't like the dreams he always had, where everything's chaotic, and that dialogue between him and someone else was completely incomprehensible. When he tried to open the door, something lightened up the room a bit. As Evan turned around, little violet flames were floating around him. It was a flying cattle infestation. From this moment, the color violet replaced the color black.